Welcome back, folks, to the Mailwright Show. This is episode 256. We've got a returning special guest. We've got John Giffen back. So, John, you were on last year, and to say things have changed is a slightly understatement. Would you like to quickly give us a 20-second intro about yourself and your background, John?
Yeah, I have been in the real estate business for about 20 years. It's second career for me. I was in the commercial printing and packaging business before I got into real estate, but I've owned 15 homes. Some of those have been investment. Most of them are primary residence, but got licensed, became an affiliate broker. 3 years later, I got my broker's license, became a managing broker of a firm, of an ERA franchise firm, and have been selling. I was Rookie of the Year my first year in real estate. Sold multi-million dollars worth of business over the years. Was a managing broker during my sales career when I was managing 480 agents and selling. I closed about 37 to 40 transactions my last year of really selling. Now I just sell to close friends. I manage 7 offices and 7 principal brokers in the greater Nashville area for Benchmark Realty as director of broker operations.
There's not much that John doesn't know about the real estate industry. He also writes regularly for Ingman, and he also has his own great website, which is johngiffen.com, and we'll have all the links in the show notes. And on that site, John has also written a book that's really an extensive guide if you're looking to enter the real estate industry and you're looking for a practical but very detailed guide about all the factors that your initial training doesn't give to you. And he's very generous because he offers a number of the chapters of the book for free as downloadable PDFs.
Mm-hmm.
So please go to the show notes because you'll find all the links to the resources I've just mentioned, and they're fantastic. I also got my great co-host Robert Newman, and after a year I called him Richard Newman, but he is the only Robert Newman. Robert, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'm a lifetime salesperson and a convert to digital marketing. I like John, I had 2 careers. My first was telemarketing. And once I saw a 3-person department outproduce 1,500 people, I knew that the way of the world was the web. And I transferred my career into real estate specifically, and I've been doing it ever since. That was 13 years ago. You can find out more information about me at inboundrem.com.
Right, and we're going to start off our discussion with John with a recent article that he wrote for Ingman, and that's why you should treat your relationships with clients like a partnership. So let's start off with that, John. So why did you write the article? And secondly, what do you see as the key thing you were trying to purvey to the readers about the article?
I think a couple of things. I think one, and I find this and I still have a lot of agents who come to my office on a regular basis. And I may have shared this in the last episode that we did last year, but sometimes I feel like a therapist, a psychologist, a counselor, because
I know Robert feels that way.
Yeah. I'd have to bill Robert. The agents are free, but Robert I need to get his credit card because I'm sure he's got a bunch. Right. But no, seriously, I think what we're seeing is over the years, a lot of agents will only look to the end of their nose. And what I mean by that is they're looking at that commission check. And because of that, they're short-sighted in that relationship with the client. I'm not saying all agents are like that. I'm just saying that I've seen a trend to where, in Tennessee, we've had a tremendous number of people who have got licensed, and they are, I think when I started in the business, we had probably 10, 11,000 licensees, maybe 15 at the most. Now we have almost 40,000 licensees in the state of Tennessee. Getting a real estate license is pretty easy. It's selling real estate that is the most difficult part. And so when I talk to agents about the importance of what we're doing, which is a client is entrusting us with their greatest asset, we've got to, one, realize that we're running a small business. Two, that we have a unique value proposition, which allows us to sell their property or help them purchase a property. And three, that I cannot do everything in this relationship in terms of making sure things take place. And what I mean by that, and that's the reason I use the word partnership, is I'm not dragging the client along. I'm walking side by side with them. Good example, for a seller, and you list their property. I have certain expectations of that seller. That is, they're going to be, one, hopefully they listen to me, that when we walk through their house, that they understand that they're going to have to declutter, they're going to have to stage the property, they're going to have to be open to the possibility of professional staging, which may require them to really make some major changes to the interior of the property. The same is true with the exterior. They're going to listen to me, hopefully, because I've had success. I know what I bring to the table, and that expectation's set. And so we're going to work together to make that happen. I spend 3 to 4 weeks with a seller before we even put a sign in the yard. And because a home becomes a house, which then becomes a commodity. And so you're going to be competing against a lot of other homes. So setting those expectations are important. So we're going to do it together as partners. For buyers, we're going to do the same thing. In a buyer partnership, we are going to work together to find their new home. And what I'm trying to do with buyers is at the very beginning of the relationship, I sit down with them for about an hour and I go through how I operate my buyer representation side of my business. I have a property marketing side, which is my selling side, my listing side, but I also have a buyer representation side where I represent buyers. And there we're going to set those expectations of, one, I'm going to be the only agent in my company through designated agency who's going to work for you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to mediate for you. I'm going to negotiate for you. I'm going to advocate, use all those terms, but I am going to go to I'll go to bat for you and make it happen. The other part of that is I have expectations of you, the buyer. You're not going to go behind my back and buy a home without me involved. And the reason is I can, after I've explained the importance of buyer representation and what I do bring to the table, then the buyer is more likely not to move forward with a transaction if they know I've got their back. And I've had many an agent walk in my office saying that their buyer went behind their back. And the first thing I asked is, what did you say when you first met with them? Did you set those expectations? Did you explain to them that you're a small business owner? You know, our time is money. I mean, just go down the list of, and those were some of the things I think I brought out in that article.
That's great. Over to you, Robert.
Well, okay. So for the audience, I said a little bit of this in the preamble, and I will circle back around and talk about this, but I want everybody to know, everybody that's listening, everybody, because, you know, John and I fall on two separate sides, which John, you probably don't even know, but John, you know, focuses his company and his efforts on learning more about Facebook and Facebook marketing and generating leads that way. And I focus on inbound marketing, which is a combination of SEO, search engine optimization, you know, things like that. But the key element of inbound marketing is the value of informational content. And do you take the time to put that online someplace for somebody to learn from or appreciate? And you, sir, whether you understand it or not, I consider you to be a world-class inbound marketer. You may not have the SEO chops because I don't know that you've taken the time to understand how the search engines work, but in terms of, do you produce valuable content for people that I haven't seen anybody do anything better. Like, let me just put it that way. Like,
can I just slightly interrupt what
Sure.
you've just said? When you were saying that, it is linked to the article, and it's linked to what John's just said, because we do have a habit of thinking that people should just know about us and know what we're going to be able to do for them. You know, it's on the website, or we've discussed it before on numerous occasions. But it doesn't really work that way, John, as an agent, and it doesn't work in most businesses. You really got to explain the value proposition to every new possible client that comes on your radar, don't you?
You do, and I call it in the book, and I believe I wrote an article for Inman last year, and I probably need to revisit it again, is that value proposition should be considered a unique value proposition. For example, for Robert, in what he does, and what he brings to the table from a technology standpoint, is a unique value proposition. You know, we all have value propositions as real estate professionals. We have access to the MLS. We have signs that we can put in the yard. We have lock boxes we can put on the door. We have access to Zillow. We have access to Trulia, Realtor.com, all of that. But what makes us unique? What helps me stand out? And what helped me stand out as a real estate professional? I had all the tools, the technology tools, the marketing materials and things like that, but it's how I use those, and it's how I would bring those tools to the table, and yet do a few more things. My reputation as a professional realtor was built on the fact that I was a shepherd of the sheep. That is, I grabbed those clients by the hand, and I didn't let go of them, and I prevented them from experiencing the bad and the ugly of real estate. You've heard the good, the bad, and the ugly. I wanted them to see the good. I did my best to keep the bad and the ugly away from them. And I teach on this to our agents and other classes, that you have got to keep what goes on behind the green curtain in this business away from your client, so that you always look like the prince and not the crazy person that is trying to break down the castle door. So, if that makes sense.
It does. But John, do I have time to get my question out, or?
Sure.
No, we're probably.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong John.
We're coming to about the 13-minute mark. So if we go for a break, then we go over to you, Robert. But it was a really fantastic article, and I strongly advise people to go and read that article. But really, and also John's got a great podcast. He's joined the podcast tribe, and it's on my list to listen to some of his podcasts. But if it's anything like the documentation you provide and the quality that you provided to our podcast, it should become a real favourite for our listeners as well as our show, because John really does bring an enormous amount of clarity to a very confusing industry. I think that's one of your great strengths, John. You bring a lot of clarity to a very confused industry. So we're going to be back in a few moments, and I'm going to hand it over to Robert. We'll see you in a few seconds, folks. We're coming back. We've had a fabulous returning guest, John Giffen. Over to you, Robert, and over to your question.
Well, actually, I was just going to follow up. So I started off by, my preamble was, hey, I was just basically telling our audience, John, that I consider you to be an inbound marketer worth checking out, which I've said countless times. You should go to his site, Do You Have a Minute, book.com. I've referenced it to at least 100 agents individually in consultation calls, because it contains assets and how to sell a home. Well, right now what we're talking about, to finally get to my question, is John is talking about doing value adds inside the initial qualification process. My original recollection, John, was you were also on our first show, and I may be wrong, but I think that you were talking about using open houses as a source to generate leads. So here's my question. your approach is wildly informational. So is mine, by the way. And I like to have a style inside my communication where I take literally the biggest problems that I have inside the sales process and address them up front. In other words, if I have I absolutely have big objections that come up with my services, price and time length, length of time it takes to succeed. Those are usually the first things I talk about, not the last, not at the end. I'm kind of curious to know your philosophy in terms of coaching and training your large group of agents. Do you buy into that philosophy? Do you buy into something else? Like, where do you sit with that?
Well, here's where, Robert, that's a great question. And this is my belief. The book that I wrote, the podcast that I do, which is called Broker Insights, the Broker Insights podcast, which I was considering writing another book this year, but I decided to get into the podcast world, and I'm loving it. It is absolutely, and it's getting a lot of good response too. And I've got some interviews coming up with some folks like you guys are doing that I'm really excited about. But the underlying fabric of what we do is a small business. And I think the consumer needs to understand that. As real estate professionals, we are small business people. So let's take buyers, for example. And I teach this to my agents. Do not put a buyer in a car until you have sat down with them and explain the buying process. They need to understand, and in my book, and also on the website that you referenced, doyouhaveaminutebook.com, I have a flow chart that I created. And one is called the buying process. The other is called the home selling process. And I use that flow chart as my talking points of this is the way this is going to work. It's going to happen this way if you work with me. And of course, you got to build rapport and you got to make sure that, things are working out well. But I also talk to them about how I get paid from a buyer representation standpoint. I talk to them about the fact that as a small business, I have expenses and I don't get paid for reimbursement of those expenses until we close on the house. Now, I don't dwell on that, but I have bullet points that I go through so they understand how I operate the business. And I find that to be very educating to the consumer. And I adapted a philosophy. If you listen to this last podcast, I tell a story about a client who went behind my back, and I lost $17,450 worth of sales commission. And this was many, many, many years ago. It's like my first year of selling. And that was the last time that ever happened. And that was a hard lesson. It was, trust me, it was harder going home to my wife telling her what had happened. And so that's when I began, and I had a great mentor at the time who told me, John, you've got to sit down with these people. They've got to understand this process. They have to understand how this business works. And so with the tools that Robert, that you talked about and some of the tools that we have, then I share those and how we can make their life easier with a mobile app, with Real Scout, which is a new platform that we're using at Benchmark. A lot of brokerages are using that, but we've had great success with that. We're moving into using MoxieWorks and I mean, these are things that don't replace me, but help me do what I do. And I don't know if that answered your question, but it's I do the same thing with sellers too. So,
John, do I have time to take a tangent real quick?
Sure.
You got a good.
I'm sorry.
You got a good 10 to 12 minutes. So
okay.
Off you go.
So, well, I want to hit my question that I cleared with everybody at the beginning of the show before we went live. But you brought something up that I've never heard of, and I always like to ask a couple questions when a professional like yourself mentions something to me that I've literally never heard of. So I'm looking at Real Scout right now, which is the first time I've ever looked at it. And it's saying on the homepage where agents and home buyers search for a home together. Can you explain to me how you're using this tool as a brokerage?
Yeah, Real Scout is a platform that utilizes artificial intelligence. It learns the behavior of the buyer. So we register them, we set up an account, or they can set their own account up with them. And the agent, for example, Robert, you're my buyer client.
Right.
And so what I'm going to do is send you a link to where you can register with Real Scout, and that link allows me to always be your agent in that account. But it's a search engine. It's a platform that is tied into our MLS, and it provides us with opportunities for them to search for properties. It learns the behavior of the buyer from the standpoint of how they're searching. If they're spending more time looking at kitchens, pictures of kitchens, or looking more at backyards, they're looking more at maybe master bedrooms, then it's going to start bringing up houses that are going to probably be closer to what they want. The other thing that it does, it automatically notifies them of new listings based on their behavior, based on their search, and they put search criteria in. So it's not right. There is science behind all this. The other thing that it does in our own company, for example, if I was listing a house in Nashville that met the needs of some of my colleagues' buyers, then it will alert those buyers of my listing, and also vice versa. So we have a lot of interaction, so that it helps sellers too, because it helps get listings sold. We started Real Scout about 6 months ago, and we have had I think about 75–80% conversion within our 1,250 agents.
So when you say 75 to 85% conversion, does that mean that these agents are using it? Is that
Yes.
what you're defining
Yes.
as conversion?
Yeah.
Okay, so they have the opportunity to use the tool,
right,
and 85 out of 100 agents are choosing to use it. And if
Yeah.
I remember correctly, you've got about 1,200 agents in your...
Yeah, we have 1,250 right now. So
Okay.
over 7 offices. So.
Okay, so you've grown. So which segues really nicely into my next question. And this is probably a Robert Newman question. I just realized that after we got off the call, I obviously have a preconceived notion of what like a director of broker operations does. But the more I looked at you and the more I looked at your stuff, you operate like you're an independent contractor. And the way I started to view you in my head was, this guy feels to me like he's like an internal coach, like Tom Ferry, but a lot more information. He's probably coaching up all of these brokers who are then going out and running the office. Well, that whole dialogue made me go, I kind of wonder what it is exactly you do at the brokerage. And if I had the chance, I wanted to ask the question.
Sure. Well, I wake up every morning asking that question, Robert. So no, in this business, and I'm very blessed because I work for a company. I started with the company 10 years ago, and we were very small. Philip Cantrell, who's our CEO, the owner, he and his wife Amanda owned the company, and we were a very small company. When he started in 2006, he started with about 5 or 6 agents. And it has grown to what it is now, and it's through his vision. He's one of the smartest people. My father, who was my mentor, will never be replaced by anyone, but Philip's right under my dad. And he has a master's in economics. He's really good at what he does. He's an incredible entrepreneur. But he came from the printing industry too. And so we use systems and processes. So long story short, to get to the answer to your question, he started out, he was the principal broker of Benchmark. We had one office. I had moved my license. I was a principal broker for another franchise firm, and I moved my license to Benchmark. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to take a break from being a principal broker or managing broker, and I will just sell. I'll just be full-time sales. And then over about a 3 or 4 month period, Philip harassed me quite a bit. He said, I want to step down. I've got to be the CEO. I want to grow this company, and I want you to be the principal broker. And I said, what part of no do you not understand? And I eventually said, okay, I will. And so I became the principal broker. We had probably, when I took over, maybe about 100 agents, maybe 150. And then we took off. It was like throttles on a jet aircraft. We just went full throttle, and we grew and grew to the point where we opened one office here. We opened another office there. And before we knew it, we had about 6 offices. Well, I had made a transition from selling and being a principal broker to just being a full-time employee of being a broker. He said, you know your stuff, and I'd like for you to consider being manager of broker services, which would be an overseer of the principal brokers and be an advisor and consultant and making sure everything is happening in terms of the mechanics of real estate, making sure that we're staying in compliance. And then about 3 years ago, I was promoted to director of broker operations, where all the principal brokers report to me. I'm their boss, and I oversee all the offices. So I'm sort of like a chief operating officer, but not really. Because if you look at real estate, we have 2 parts. We have the mechanics and we have the business side. My specialty is the mechanics. I know how this thing works, what we call real estate. I know how to get things from point A to point Z and to do it well. I'm not bragging, but I've been beat up enough over the years. I can get you through a process. I know the legal side. I know the regulatory side, the federal side, the RESPA, HUD, the whole bit. And so I'm considered the chief principal broker of Benchmark.
Gotcha.
I'm the one who basically is the conduit to our real estate commission, the conduit to the federal side, the whole bit. But the other thing I do in the background is I write. I write the licensing. It's called the Tennessee Residential Core, which is required for license renewal. I write that for Tennessee Realtors, which used to be the Tennessee Association of REALTORS. I also write for 2 distant online education providers, and I write for Inman, and now the podcast. So, but the reason I do all of this, though, Robert, is I don't do it for me. I don't do it to make money. Trust me, I'm not becoming a millionaire since I wrote that book. I get to go to Outback once in a while when it's open, pre-COVID. But I'm getting to the point, I'm approaching 60. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting close. And what I want to do is I want to finish well. I want to give back to this industry, because I really believe what we do in real estate is noble, and there's still a place for us in the economy of this country and North America. So anyway, does that make sense?
You're my hero for the day, man. Yes,
Oh.
it makes sense. I couldn't have said it better myself. I've been approaching this from a different angle, the digital marketing angle, but my approach it resonates deeply with yours in the sense that I don't feel like digital marketing needs to be as complicated as everybody is making it. And I feel like people that have the power inside the real estate industry is actually the individual realtor. It's just whether or not you decide to claim that power, because the expertise still lies with the guys and the gals that have their boots on the ground. And that's where all the digital marketing gravy is, if people would just use it. They just don't.
Well, it's digital. Well, I just said digital marketing is one way you can stay in front of your clients and your prospects, and that's what's important.
We need to wrap up the podcast part of the show. We like to keep it around the 30-minute mark, but hopefully John can stay on for some bonus content. Can you stay on, John?
Most definitely.
I just want to ask him about how he sees how the pandemic will affect real estate in the next 18 to 2 years, and cover some other quick topics, which you can watch. You can watch the whole interview plus the bonus content on the Mel Wright YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube, put Mel Wright in, and it's the quickest and most easiest way to see all our interviews. And also, if you subscribe to the show, it tells you when the next show is live. So it's a great service. So I suggest you go over to YouTube and search for Mel Wright and subscribe to our show. There must be over 200 interviews on the Mel Wright YouTube channel right now. Experts like the quality of John, so well worth listening to, and all free as well. So John, now how can people, find out, you know, go and mention your podcast
Oh, yeah.
again, and also
Most
mention
definitely.
how to find your book. Because
Yeah.
if I think as somebody in their first year or probably in their second year,
Mm-hmm.
they should really buy your book,
Yeah.
because I read some of it, and
Yeah.
if I was going to get a license,
Yeah.
I would buy your book.
Well,
Right.
yeah, it's designed for those who, it really is good for those who just get into the business. You can purchase the book on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and also in audio version through Audible. And that link is on the Amazon book page. You can go to audible.com and purchase it too. It's also available through National Bookseller, any bookseller who you can order it through any bookseller. And Ingram here in Nashville prints the book for me. The podcast, which I'm really excited about, is Broker Insights Podcast. It's on every major podcast platform, from Apple Podcasts to Spotify to iHeartRadio. And you also can listen to it on my website at johngiffen.com. Just click on Broker Insights Podcast.
That's great. And you have to come back on the show at the beginning of next year. Don't leave it so long, John. Robert, how can people find out more about you and your business?
Well, I gave this huge preamble, so I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to just say, hey, you want to learn more about me, go to inboundrem.com. That's the word inbound, rabbitedwardmichael.com.
And if you want to find out more about Melwright, and we've been busy in these months of COVID and the pandemic in building out our Facebook campaigns and making sure they get results. We're now actively looking for agents and people to become part of the Melwright tribe. I think it's the most value for money, most effective platform in real estate at the present moment. So if that's interesting to you, you can go to the Melwright site and sign up for me to show you a free demo and discuss all your real estate problems and how Melwright can help you with that. And that's totally free, folks. So I would take that up. We'll be back next week with another great guest like John, or an internal discussion between me and Robert.
Which isn't so great.
It's great stuff. I thought our last one was pretty good.
Throw me the bonus. I'm just joking.
Yeah, he's just teasing me. I'm shocked by that intervention. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Bye.
So on to our bonus content, John. So, no one in their right mind could probably predict a pandemic. And it's like living through a Stephen King film. We've probably got another, hopefully we find a vaccine that will actually work and can be used without too many side effects. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully we can see the back of this terrible virus. But in the next, what do you see as the long-term effects? And I think everybody agree there are going to be some long-term, it's going to affect medium to long-term trends in the real estate sector. What are some of the things you think? I think you mentioned some of the effects you've already seen in your own market that you feel have been driven by the pandemic already, haven't you?
Yeah, I think one of the things that probably was expedited by the pandemic is virtual showings, using technology to show property, using more technology to sign documents, which we've been doing for years, but I think more and more people know that they don't want to be face-to-face with people if there's an illness such as a pandemic. I think also there is a sense that I feel like based on this, I don't know if it's a mini recession that we're in. There's a lot of people who are unemployed right now who could be first-time home buyers, and that's had a big impact. The economy has got to get back to where it is healthy. We got to extract the pandemic, and we've got to get back to a level that is productive. one of the things that I think we're seeing is inventory problems are still big issue. We don't have enough inventory, and that's pretty much true across the country right now. In most markets, there's just not enough houses. And that's going to continue for a while because builders are not going to build spec houses. They're going to build them to order. And I think, I just think it's a wait and see. Really, to answer your question, Jonathan, I think it's too early to tell, really, for a long term. Interest rates now are just crazy awesome. I mean, they're good. I mean, you can get a 30-year, we have an in-house lender, and she was telling me that 30-year fixed rate was at 2.85 or 2.95.
Crazy.
Yeah, and now the gap between 30-year and 15-year has really narrowed. I refinanced my home from a 30-year to a 15-year back right when the pandemic started, and I got a 15-year at 2.8. You know, we've historically said anything under 8% is good money. But my first mortgage was 12.5%. And when I bought my second house and got an FHA at 9.5%, I thought I died and went to heaven.
Now, I just want to interrupt because, I'm a bleeding British liberal, but I believe in capitalism to some extent. As far as I believe in anything that's man-made. And do you see, this is a big question, and if you don't feel you can handle it, I totally understand. But, normally capitalism, when there's a big demand, normally capitalism will supply what the demand is. Do you see in the next 5 or 10 years anything, there's a lot of people that want to own a home.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just nothing out there that they can afford.
Yeah.
Even though they can get a loan and they meet the normal criteria, how is the market going to resolve this? Or are the forces that are against that happening so endemic that you don't think it is? Because normally the market will find a solution, won't it?
I think it will. I think the big question is when. I've found that the economy is very cyclical. Things go in cycles. One of the things that's changing, though, I'm part of the baby boom generation. I'm towards the end of it, but I am part of the baby boomers. My kids, who are, my oldest is 32, my second oldest is almost 30, and my third oldest is 24. No, she's 25, soon to be 25. And their whole outlook is different than my outlook. And I really believe that this is going to change our economy from the generation that's coming up. I mean, I think the generation coming up, they may look at capitalism quite differently. And my concern is, because I have one who is looking at, well, why don't we just do socialism? That seems to work. Well, not in a republic. It's very difficult. But I'm not. Let me take politics aside. I really believe it's going to be a few years before we really know. But basic economics, supply and demand. I think what might happen is someone's going to get innovative to do a new type of housing. Now, I don't know what that's going to look like. We've lived with single family residential for years and years. We, every city has condos.
It could be a shared equity where
it could
be shared equity. I'm surprised that hasn't, because it is present in Europe. What I mean by that, listeners and viewers, is that large financial institutions not only give you a mortgage, but they will keep a certain degree of the actual equity of the property. So they will allow you to buy 60, 70% of the equity of the property, but they will keep 30 plus you're paying a mortgage. So the deal is, if you ever sell the property, the actual joint owner also gets a benefit from the sell as well. And there's various types of those schemes in Europe, isn't there, John?
Yeah, there are, and it's very diverse over there. But it's been very successful for them, and throughout the European continent. And I think the other thing that's going to happen, probably in the next 30 years, I don't think people are going to want big houses. I really don't. I think the generation that's behind my kids and my grandkids, and I talked about cycling. I think we're cycling back to post-World War II. I think we're going to go back to smaller homes that are more efficient. The baby boomers created the mega mansions. When we start dying out, I mean, even the house I have, I've downsized. We downsized to a small 2,400 square foot. I left 3,500 square feet and went to 2,400 square foot ranch. And my kids still think we live in too big of a house. So I think you might see some more Levittown, you know, the old Levittown back in the 1940s that was created after World War II and up in New York. And you know, they created the suburban model. I don't know. I think something's going to have to change in the composition of housing. What does housing of the future look like to where land acquisition's not a big hurdle? That's what the problem is right now. Builders can't build enough houses because they can't afford the land. And then they run up against zoning issues and planning issues with municipalities because they want to put houses up like this. Well, cities don't want houses like this. And then you say, well, what about we build more apartments? Well, yeah, we can build more apartments, but then you got rent issues and rent cycles, and and it's more advantageous to own a home than to rent because you're building equity, and it's vicious. But something's got to change. Something will change. It may be after I'm gone, but it's going to change. It's going to have to.
Yeah, I think so. Have you got an ending question, Robert?
Nope. Actually, I've got an ending statement. So, John, I love talking to you, man. You always make me. You always get my wheels turning. I hadn't even thought about what the future might look. And so, Jonathan, thank you for asking the question, because I'm sitting here, my wheels are turning, and all I'm thinking of is what might that look like? I hope you're right. That's all I can say.
Well, I think it must be, Robert, because there is enormous pent-up demand, and I totally agree with John. As a kind of European that's been living in America for about 12, 14 years, I am not attracted to large houses. I don't want to live in a tiny house, right. But it really, my fantasy is the kind of English cottage.
Yeah.
2-bedroom cottage that's got an outhouse that might be my office, with a nice garden. That's what I like. That's my taste, not some 4,000 foot mansion. It really does not appeal to me, Robert. No matter how much money I've got.
Sure, me either. But guys, singing my song, my current house is 1,458 square feet. I probably, except for John, maybe I win the prize in terms of smallest space, and I'm perfectly happy with it. The only reason I'd move out is that it's a very dense metropolitan area, and I would like someplace that's a little closer to trails and things like that to walk, and a little more space for the animals. And that was literally the end of my complaints about my space. But John, here's what I was going to finish with, the John Giffen. Listen, this John is a longtime tech entrepreneur and is focused on real estate. And I am really good with inbound marketing. I would love it if you open up on your guest list on your podcast. Please consider us to be possibilities for your show.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
And John, if you know any brokers that you could recommend to us, that we'd like to get more brokers on the show that are running really tight ships, that really know what they're doing and really running effective. So if you know some of your colleague brokers, you might be interested in coming to the show. We love those to come on.
That'd be good, most definitely. And,
right, we're going to wrap up the show. We've had John back. I think it's been a fantastic show. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Bye.